Pamela Nance is an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and she's also a seasoned investigator of the consciousness after death. She's experienced unknown ET and spirit phenomena throughout her life, and she joins us. Hi, Pamela, how are you?
I'm good, Dean. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been a lifelong experiencer going through my notes, and you've got some really interesting stuff to talk about here today, including an experience that you had at Chris Bledsoe's residence, I think about 5 years ago. But before that, I just wanted to kind of get back and ask you, when did your experiences first begin?
I remember being around the age of 4 or 5, having my first experience in my bedroom one night. The room was filled with an orange glow, and I felt a presence at the foot of my bed and looked to see some little fingers coming up over the footboard, and this little monkey type being appeared to me. And I think, in retrospect and having gone through some regressions, I think it could have possibly been an ET appearing to me maybe as a little monkey, so I wouldn't be frightened since I was such a young child. It played peekaboo, and, I was laughing, and then the next morning I woke up and that was the only memory I had. I'm not sure if anything occurred after that, but I had instances also as a 5 and 6-year-old child of being able to sit out in the yard and leave my body. I had the feeling that I was flying through the countryside. I could fly to a nearby mountain, and it was as though I felt that I was keeping a secret from my family. I would sneak out into the yard and do this activity, and I confided in an older sister who also confided in me that she was able to do the same thing. And so I felt some comfort in that. The next memorable, very memorable experience was as a 10-year-old. Again, I was in my bedroom getting ready to go to sleep, and 2 beings appeared beside my bed, a man and a woman. They were dressed in black bodysuits with turtlenecks, and they had dark brown hair. The woman had shoulder length hair and bangs, and the man had medium hair, and they presented a timepiece in front of me. It was like a giant stopwatch that they held in front of me, and I got the sort of a download. They weren't really speaking, but just telling me, communicating to me that when the timepiece struck 12, they were going to take me. And my next memory was coming back into my room, and I was missing my head. And I was convinced I had been beheaded. And even though I didn't think I had a head, I was walking around my house, and my older sister, again, the one that had confided in me about being able to leave her body, I was just crying and telling her these people had come and taken my head. And it was a very traumatic experience. Any time that the same lighting in my room was recreated for at least 15 years, well into adulthood, I had PTSD. It was like the bottom of my world falling out. It's difficult to explain to someone that hasn't had that type of an experience or suffered from PTSD, but it's just a horrible, horrible feeling. And upon regression, I learned that they actually took me from my room, floated me onto a craft, and put me on a metal table. And I had the feeling that they had taken my head to a different end of the table. And what they communicated to me was that they were adjusting my karma for a past life when I had beheaded a sacred white elephant. And I did recall that as a child. I recalled that part, that they had taken my head in turn for this sacred white elephant. And I was raised in the rural part of North Carolina as a Southern Baptist. I knew nothing about Hindu religion, much less a sacred white elephant as a 10-year-old
Mm-hmm.
child. But during the regression, more information came about, and they subsequently, floated me back into my room. But what was interesting, I'm not sure if it was like the very next day, but a few days later, I woke and had a fine red rash covering my entire head from the neck up. My entire face was inflamed, and my parents took me to the doctor. He really could not explain what was going on. I remember they prescribed some cream, and I was out of school for at least a week, waiting for this redness to disappear. But it's sort of coincidental that
Yeah.
happened just from the neck up. So I don't know if that was a result from being on board the craft and something that I was exposed to. So those were really traumatic kind of childhood events, particularly that one at age 10.
Yeah. Well, were the beings that took you that night, were they, I mean, did they have a human appearance?
Yes, they were very attractive people, very good-looking people. The woman was beautiful, the man was handsome. They had dark brown eyes, just chiseled features,
Mm-hmm.
regular hair.
Has anyone been able that identifies the races of aliens out there? Has anyone been able to identify who they might have been?
Um, I've done some research online to see if they match up with any of the different races that people report seeing, and they come close to maybe Arcturians or, and I'm not sure if I'm even recalling that correctly,
Mm-hmm.
but no one exactly like that. I have spoken with a friend of mine who's had similar experiences, and she encountered a couple of beings that appeared much the way these people did to me.
Yeah. So that particular occasion, I mean, was it a benign experience? Was it
Oh,
like they wanted to help you?
at the time, all I knew that was that they appeared over me. They told me they were going to take me. And when I came back, I knew I had been beheaded for this in retribution for this sacred white elephant. So it was a very terrifying ordeal. My mom was working a second shift job at a nursing home. And when she got home around, I don't know, it was sometime after midnight, her shift ended at midnight. And I was crying in my bed, even at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And, she tried to comfort me. And I was distraught for weeks after that occurrence. And again, if I encountered that type of lighting in my room, I had PTSD for years after that, and occasionally I still get that feeling, and it's just a terrible, terrible feeling. Although I think what they were doing was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
If they were balancing my karma for this terrible thing that I'd done in a past life, um, and in some other regressions, I've learned that I was an elephant keeper in India. So maybe it was
Yeah.
during that lifetime. And I found some mention in the Mahabharata about 5 sons who helped fight that battle. And the reason they had to go into this battle was that one of the sons had beheaded a sacred white elephant. So I don't know if there was some connection to that. But again, I knew nothing about Hindu religion
Yeah.
as a 10-year-old.
I think the two important things to come out of that, so to me, would be that it seems that what you do in one life can dictate how your next life is going to pan out. And the other thing is that the aliens themselves, to take such an interest in what you did in a previous life, suggests that they may be connected to us in a very, very strong way. Maybe we may be connected to them.
Exactly. I think these folks have shown up in other areas of my life through communication, EVP communication, as well as in the experience possibly at Chris Bledsoe's. They look very similar. The folks I encountered through the Bledsoe experience was they had lighter hair, but the features were the same.
Yeah. You mentioned when you were 4 or 5, it's such a common scenario. You know, they show up in a bedroom, and your experience there is similar to Terry Lovelace's experience. Terry, of course, wrote the book The Incident at Devil's Den, and we did a 3-part series on the night the monkey men showed up, and that's how he described them as a 6-year-old child, as monkey men.
I was so excited when I looked at your site and I saw Terry's account. I'd never heard of the monkey men before, and that part of my experience came out fully in a regression with Kathleen Martin, and that was probably a year and a half ago. And so I only recently read Terry's experience, so I emailed Kathleen, very excited, to say I have some validation that this being or whatever actually did appear to me as a monkey. And I think maybe Terry and I are possibly around the same age. Maybe that's how they were appearing to children at that
Right.
time, just to keep from scaring them. Or maybe there's a race of monkey men. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to kind of explore that.
Yeah. I think people would be interested to know, in the situation when you're first confronted by ET, say in your bedroom, and as a young child, I mean, are you in a position to be able to scream or yell, or are you completely frozen and can't do anything?
Well, the experience with the two people that beheaded me, I was unable to do anything. I was helpless. I remember lying in bed and them showing me the timepiece and not being able to shout out for my dad, who was just in the other room, in the living room. So there's very little I remember, like consciously. It's through regression that a great deal of those memories came through. I just know that I was very terrified, and when I came back, my head was missing,
Right.
but I could still talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I've asked the question before, with experiences and also experts. Young children that have experiences from a young age, how it affects their life. And I always wondered, and I look back now, just in my school days, and there were always kids that seemed to not quite fit in, or wanted to be left alone, or were outcast, and I just assumed they had issues, maybe at home. But with more of these experiences now coming to the surface, I wonder whether some of those kids were going through this very thing.
Possibly. A benefit for me, my birthday falls in November, so that meant that I missed the school cutoff date by just days. And when I did begin elementary school, I was older than all the other children. And I had older brothers and sisters that had already taught me to read and my alphabet and numbers. And so I was a very popular child. And I kept what was going on in my home life away from my school life. Um, but as I became older and I had more and more experiences, I did get the feeling that I was kind of on the outside looking in at everyone. And that
Mm-hmm.
feeling has just continued to grow, into my adult life. I look at people as other
Right,
almost.
right.
I have a camaraderie with just a few folks that I can really open up and speak with about these events. And it's because they've experienced the same things. But I've always had the feeling that I'm kind of on the outside looking in.
Okay, so experiences have told me that they feel like they don't belong here.
Right, right. And I don't want to, this sounds terrible, but I hope I don't have to come back here. I think I've lived many, many lives, and I'm just hoping that if I reincarnate, maybe it's on another planet. Although I have had recurring dreams of being on a water planet, on a water world, and one regression that indicates I have spent time on a planet that's inhabited by water people.
Right, right. Actually, those sentiments are probably shared by a lot of people right at this moment, Pam. The way
Yeah.
the world is going, it's totally upside down, and I think there's a lot of people trying to get off the planet at the moment. So, did you experience as a young child? Once you had these encounters, did you feel like your senses were heightened? Did you have intuitive abilities?
Absolutely. Yes. And I, I think it was a combination of the experiences and also my heritage. I have American Indian and Basque on my mother's side. And my grandmother and two great aunts were midwives and root doctors. Which means they would go out into the woods and gather roots and herbs, and a lot of the women in the community came to them for medicines, and they were very open to spirit. And so my mother shared a lot of that with us kids when we were growing up, her heritage of being exposed to these very um, strong, smart women. And my mom was intuitive, and I've had numerous precognitive dreams and just intuition, but it seemed to be heightened, particularly after my near-death experience when I was 33. It really kind of took off.
Right. Well, let's talk about the out-of-body experience you referenced in your notes, and also we'll talk about the NDE. But firstly, the out-of-body experience. What happened there?
Well, I had a really profound out of body experience. I've had numerous ones, but a very profound one when I was 16 undergoing a tonsillectomy. I awoke, what I thought I was awaking in the recovery room. And I remember sitting up and then standing up and looking back, and my body was lying on the tape or on the bed in the recovery room. And I thought, what the heck, what's going
Mm-hmm.
on? And it frightened me. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm just going to lay back down. And so I guess I laid back down into my body. And when I woke up, the first thing, not being able to talk that well, but my family, they had a difficult time waking me up after they got me to the room. So at the point I opened my eyes, my entire family and the nursing staff, they were standing over me, and my sister started, another older sister started crying, and they were so happy to see me wake up. And I remember just saying, are there mirrors in the recovery room? Because I thought, maybe I just saw myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a really profound out of body experience. But I've had several where, I would think I was napping, and I was actually like out of my body, walking around in the yard. And I would think, I've got to get back in my body. Because I was working double shifts in a restaurant at the time, working my way through college. And I thought, I've got to get back in my body so I can wake up and get ready for work. And it was a real struggle. And sometimes I would hear like the wind blowing past my head, almost as though I was like doing astral travel or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened numerous times as a like 17, 18, 19-year-old. And then again in the 80s when I was working, these two shifts and going to college and really stressed out. But just during those nap times, I could leave my body.
Yeah. Did you have any control over that? I mean, did it just happen, or you could just will it to happen?
It would it would just happen, and I always knew that it was about to happen because I would think, okay, here we go again, and it would just happen. Although one time I did try to take control, and I found myself flying through outer space, like
Wow.
past stars, and I remember looking back, and it was like I was connected to the earth through this gold cord. And that stuck in my head. And I remember reading some account later on about other people experiencing that. It's almost like an umbilical cord that you're still attached to your body, but you're able to just fly out into the universe. Maybe Shirley MacLaine or someone like that
Yeah.
recounted that in
Yeah.
the 80s.
I think we owe Shirley MacLaine a profound apology because, I mean, she's been talking about this for a long time and she's been made fun of a lot.
Oh yeah, I was very interested in the whole metaphysical movement in the 80s. I read her book, and it was because of my own experiences I found, this kinship with her, and having come out of the 70s and the hippie movement and the age of Aquarius and being in tune to astrology, all of those things, attracted me because it was different. It offered me answers to what could possibly be going on with me. Mainstream religion certainly could not answer the questions I had as a child and as a teenager.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you did you seek counsel from people that have gone through similar things and they could give you, an assessment or an opinion of what it is?
um, Not as a young person because, I had a fairly close group of people that I worked with at the restaurant when I was working the double shifts, and they enjoyed hearing my stories. They would be like, okay, what's happened to you now? But none of them had ever had any of those experiences. I really can't recall anyone back during that time period except for my investigative partner, Ashleigh Field. She had similar experiences as a child. And she's the person that I teamed up with for the paranormal investigations. But not many people that, could actually relate to what I'd experienced.
Okay, what about the near-death experience?
Well, that happened when I was 33. I was about 2 weeks from graduating undergrad, and I had a history of duodenal ulcers, and one perforated my stomach, and I bled out for probably about, I don't know, 36 hours. I thought I had a
Wow.
stomach bug, and awoke. So I bled from like Friday night until Sunday morning, and I felt really kind of funny in bed that morning and very thirsty. So I got up. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. My husband was leaving to go to a flea market, and I just wanted a big glass of soda. So I asked him to bring a soda back from when he came back home, and I turned to go in the bathroom, and that's the last I remember. Thankfully, he had not stepped out the door. He heard
Right.
me fall and came and started CPR, but I did not go through a tunnel as your typical, near-death experiencers report. I went to the edge of just an incredibly beautiful green valley. And it was like I was standing on the side of a mountain looking down into this valley that was so incredibly green. And off in the distance were snow-covered mountains. And in the middle of this valley was a huge tree. And it spoke to me as the tree of life. That's what I knew it was. And as I'm looking down on that scene, I'm then under the tree. And there aren't any people there. There are only animals, birds, deer, any kind of animal you could think of. It was there. It was like a scene from Bambi. And, I could hear the chirping and the animal noises. And it was just, it's indescribable, the colors and the life and the vibrancy of everything surrounding me. And beneath the tree was my Rottweiler, who had just passed away 2 days before. She was 14, and I was with her until about 2 o'clock in the morning when she passed. But she was like a young dog again, like maybe 1 or 2 years old. She was so happy to see me. I could feel her head under my hands. It was real. It was very real. But off in the distance, I could hear my husband calling me. And it's kind of like if you fall asleep at night on the sofa and someone's trying to get you up to go to bed and you
Yep.
really don't want to. It was kind of that thing, like, leave me alone. I don't want to leave this place. But as soon as I gave in to his voice, I came up to consciousness, and he was like, don't move. The ambulance is on the way. And so I was in intensive care for about 5 days. I had to be transfused. I lost like half my blood volume, and they coded me a couple of times in the hospital. And
Wow.
friends would come in and ask, did you have a near-death experience? And I was like, well, because I was thinking about the typical tunnel and all the loved
Yeah.
ones in there. And I was like, no, but I had a beautiful dream. Um, and I guess it was about a year later, I was watching Oprah because she was going to have NDE um, people on there, people who've had near-death experiences. And I thought, I'm going to watch this. And everyone had the tunnel story and the loved ones, except for one lady. And she described the exact same experience that I had. And I was elated, to actually hear that someone else had had this valley kind of experience. But what was interesting after that, when my husband brought me home, he had a difficult time getting me in the house because I could see the aura and the energy around all the plants and the trees. And, I was like, can't you see this? And I was bending down and looking at the flowers and the leaves. And he was like, we need to get you in, you need to lie down. So after that, I could, if I touched a lamp, the light bulb would blow. I
Wow.
could walk beneath like street lights and they would go out. I couldn't reach for cans off the grocery shelf without being shocked painfully. Um, and I just felt like I had all this energy coming from my hands. And it's lasted. I ended up studying healing touch and became a certified healing touch practitioner, and I've had some success in working on people. So I kind of attribute that heightened sense of electromagnetic energy or something coming after that
Yeah.
near-death experience.
Well, I guess that's what we really are, is pure energy, and our bodies, I guess, probably like a casing to kind of prevent the stuff that you were talking about happening. But once your energy comes out of your body and then it goes back in, I feel like it's not fully sealed again,
Right.
and hence the abilities that you seem to have. What about psychic? Do you have any psychic abilities?
I do, but it's not under my control, and they're just random psychic abilities. I really need to try to just, get that a little more under control. But I have so much going on in my head, so many different things that I want to do, and different avenues of thought, that I really need to spend more time trying to quiet that down and maybe develop it a little more. Um, but I have a lot of precognitive dreams, but they're just random, you know, just random things that will happen the next day. And I'm like, okay, well, I just dreamed about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So,
can't win the lottery, but
well, I was thinking maybe I could invite you to the track sometime and
right.
and give you a form guide. Um, Pamela, so after all this, you decided to become a paranormal investigator. So when did that happen?
Um, that happened in 2008. I've always had activity here in my home. I've lived here about 40 years, and Ashleigh is my stepdaughter. So she and I spent a few years together in this house when she was a young teenager. And when I first came here, she said, we have some weird stuff that goes on in this house. And it is an 1890s house that sits on a very old road that dates back to pre-Revolutionary War. So there's always been activity in the home, and she and I have shared this for, you know, over 40 years now. And things were kind of ramping up as far as, you know, just odd stuff going on in the home, and knowing, you know, the things that I had encountered as a child. It piqued my interest when in the early 2000s, you know, there were a lot of paranormal teams starting up. And I thought, well, you know, this is something Ashleigh and I should explore. Um, but we didn't really want to do it from the scare factor point. You know,
Yeah.
you see all these TV shows, and people are running and screaming, and that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to find out, where are these people and how can they communicate with us? We wanted to kind of get it to, like, down to a scientific level. So we approached it like an archaeological dig. And I fell back on my training as an archaeologist to layer the history up from the earliest occupation of sites to the present day. So we sought out historic sites all over the Southeast. And that approach really, really worked. Ashleigh's a great historian, and she can find deeds and all kinds of information. She's just got a real talent for that. So we would go to these sites knowing everything that we could possibly know from the historic record about the occupants. And sometimes we were able to take a site back to the late 1600s. A couple of plantations south of here were land grants from King George. And so we would go in and start at that layer and work our way up. And through that investigative technique, we captured incredible audio evidence of these people speaking to us, giving us information. And sometimes it was historical information that we could then, after the investigation, we could take and validate through the historic record. And it was funny, the curators of these homes had questions about some of the footprints on the property of old buildings that no longer existed, that they would like to incorporate, you know, into their historic tours. And so through our work, our paranormal work, we were able to disclose some of that information back to these historic property owners. And, you know, we captured French Huguenot, like a Frenchman speaking to us. We were able to give information about occupants that the owners had no idea that they had lived there. But then when we researched, we were able to find the records. So it was a really exciting time of investigation. And that historic investigating went on for probably about 4 years. And towards the end of that time period, we had so many questions about, where are you? Why can you communicate with us? And we need all this equipment to communicate with you. So we began studying quantum physics just to try to figure out, okay, what kind of timeline are these people in? And how are they able to communicate with us in this way without thinking of them as dead people? You know, because clearly they weren't dead.
Yeah.
They were interacting with us and giving us information in real time. And when we started kind of going down that path, we began receiving audio that indicated they were, some of these people or beings coming through were interdimensional. You know, we would ask, how do you get here? And we got portal and wormhole and, you know, names of their star system. And so that kind of put us on a different path, you know, thinking, okay, we're not just dealing with trapped dead people.
No, well, they're not ghosts, obviously. They're other beings.
Right.
Yeah. So is that the kind of information they gave you, like where they're from, their location, how they get here?
We were told the name of their planet, their location within like the Stargate, and uh, just numerous EVP communications. And we put together what we called our quantum physics PowerPoint and presented that at a conference in Atlanta, Georgia in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
We incorporated our historic evidence along with this sort of quantum evidence. And that was at a conference called Dragon Con. And we presented, and fortunately, Stanton Friedman was there that year, and he sat in and was just really kind of blown away by the quantum physics type
Mm-hmm.
evidence that we incorporated. And afterwards, we met with him and chatted a few times, and that's when we were introduced to Kathleen Martin.
Right, right. Just before we go on to our next topic, so you confirmed that the star systems and planets that they pointed out actually were there?
Well, they're not named what we named them. So
Right.
maybe, they have different names.
Yeah, and that's the same. That's the
Yeah,
same with the different species of aliens. I mean, I guess they're named what we name them, and
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. One name that kept coming through very early on. I mean, we would be like in Charleston, South Carolina, and ask, where are you from? Adela.
Okay.
And so we started getting Adela in 2012, and that continued for a number of years. We're Adelans. We're from Adela.
Mm-hmm.
And Pomos, Pomos, I guess is
Right, right. Okay.
um,
Well, I'm sure there's a number of super sleuths watching us right now that will be on the computer and in the books and looking. But Pamela, um, the Chris Bledsoe residence experience, that was quite fascinating, I guess. And you mentioned Stanton Friedman and Kathy Martin, so I guess this is what we're leading into here.
right. So Stanton thought that, we could really benefit in speaking with Kathy. Um, of course, hopefully everyone's familiar with Kathy, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. But she began early in her sort of investigative life, also looking at the paranormal, because she had a lot of poltergeist activity, I think, in the home where she grew up, but subsequently has sort of aligned that with ET presence. But she had an interest in the paranormal, much the way Ashleigh and I did, and that's why Stanton thought, could really benefit in speaking to her. And so we emailed with Kathy several times and ended up meeting she and Denise Stoner down in Florida to talk about, our investigative techniques and how we thought that we might be able to really resonate with maybe a location where a known abduction had occurred. And Kathy thought of Chris Bledsoe. I'm in North Carolina and he's in the eastern part of the state. And she thought that would be a good fit. So she reached out to Chris and he agreed to allow Ashleigh and I to come there to conduct an investigation. And so we did that in June of 2015.
Okay. And then you were all set up and something happened.
Right. So we had planned to go out around dusk that evening, but a big thunderstorm pushed through, and we were unable to go out until about 10 p.m. that evening. And so we first set up a video camera on a tripod, and that was to basically get a nice view of the backyard. And as we stood setting the camera up, we were chatting. Chris was there and his wife and Ashleigh and I, and a few of Chris's family members were further out in the yard, but the four of us were standing by the video camera, just kind of discussing hypnosis and some people that, we had known in common, and Um, and so that segment of video and audio lasted for about 8 minutes. And towards the end of that audio from the video camera, you can hear us move away to go under this tree in Chris's yard, about 20 feet in front of the camera. To begin the investigation, we use an SB7, a Spirit Box 7 device that sweeps AM and FM radio frequencies at a very, very high speed. And the theory is that offers, the spirits or the beings a platform of communication through this white noise. So you can hear us step away. We're starting the EVP session. But at the same time, you can hear what sounds like Ashleigh and I being brought back on a craft.
Wow.
So we think we had a time warp. And what we thought happened, as we recall the event and subsequent days, we remembered, stepping away from the video camera, going under the tree, starting our investigation as we normally would, asking questions, who's here, where are you, how do you come through, those types of things. And immediately we were directed to look at the moon, to the left of the moon. Well, at this point, Chris's wife and the other family members had gone inside. It was, kind of late for them. So the three of us were left there asking these questions, and we're getting just crazy EVPs coming through, directing us to look at the moon. And there's a bright object to the left of the moon. And the moon was about 78% full that night. But this object was much brighter than any of the surrounding stars. And it kind of was pulsating. And that's pretty much all we remembered until we were kind of came to and we were standing shoulder to shoulder. And I remember feeling a little bit nauseous and dizzy. And I relayed that to Ashleigh and Chris that I didn't feel well. And they were like, yeah, I don't feel well either. And we were like, okay, let's go inside. But what was strange, the last memory we had, we were standing there asking questions. We had our equipment. And when we kind of came to, the equipment was on the ground behind us, on the wet ground, which, we would not have done.
Yeah.
And it was turned off. And that was counterintuitive for our entire purpose of being there. We were there to gather evidence. Why is our equipment on the ground turned off? That made no sense. But we just kind of chalked it up to feeling, weird, because we had driven 3 hours. We'd had a full day. It's now, clearly late into the evening. We just kind of picked up the equipment and walked back inside. And at that point, Chris's wife came out of the bedroom and wanted to know where we had been. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And we were like, we were in the yard. And she was like, I looked out back, you weren't there. So we couldn't explain that. We just started drinking coffee because we had a 3-hour drive back to my home, and Ashleigh was returning to Georgia. So we just wanted to wake up and get back home. But what was interesting as we left Chris's house, we kind of went around in a big square back to the highway, and there was a shopping center over to the left. And at that moment, this gigantic shooting star just went shooting right above the shopping center. And we were both like, wow, did you see that? But in retrospect, now I'm wondering, was it really a shooting star? Or,
Yeah.
it was the craft saying goodbye or whatever. But after we got back, of course, we slept for a few hours. Ashleigh headed back to her home in Georgia. And I started reviewing the audio. Well, so we go out at 10. my audio only ran for an hour and 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, that would have been about 11:15, but we didn't go inside and didn't get back inside the house until 1 o'clock. So we had like an hour and 45 minutes of missing time.
Mm-hmm.
So I called Ashleigh. She was still en route to Georgia. I said, look, as soon as you get home, you need to look at your audio and your video. Something strange happened. I'm missing an hour and 45 minutes of audio. And so over the next few days or weeks or whatever, we realized something happened. Well, Ashleigh had not only run her video camera that first 8 minutes, upon which the battery died and we had to replace it, it also ran that entire time that we had the missing time. And what was picked up then was really phenomenal. We probably captured at least 50 EVPs from the audio and the video camera of what sounds like a roar, like, you know, possibly a craft coming in, voices saying, we're on them, we got them, we're abducting. Do you want to know what we left as? Is what they're saying.
Wow.
Like I don't know if they're asking us that or whom, but, you know, get them, we got them. Just clearly, you know, this great audio that indicates they took us. But, you know, then when we have that first 8 minutes, it's like we overlapped ourselves, and the EVPs, the first says it's like a mechanical or a, you know, a robotic voice saying, step out. And Ashleigh says, we're back. And I'm saying the craft landed.
Gosh.
There are people looking out the windows. And Ashleigh didn't want to be back. I won't repeat what she said, but she was not happy to be back.
She wanted to go with them.
Well, yeah, she did. And you know, I wasn't happy either, but she used, you know, a word that, you know, I won't repeat here.
No.
She was very upset about being back. So we just discovered that within the last 6 months, because we hadn't really like listened closely to that first 8 minutes because we thought we were just setting up the equipment. But then when we were reviewing the video segment of that first 8 minutes, where we actually captured this probably 6-foot being in the tree, we also heard the audio. So we captured this incredible alien, for lack of a better term, sitting in that tree that we were investigating under. And he's in a black bodysuit. It appears that he's very creamy colored skin with a bony ridge down the center of his head. It looks like he's got night vision on one side of his head. And he's just sitting there, sitting in the tree. And you can also see like the smaller sort of these legs kind of going up towards this other being. And it's a small being that lands on the larger being's shoulder. So we've worked to like really pull that part of the video out, and Kathy's helped us with some of that, and she went frame by frame and actually was able to capture that smaller being who looks like he's got a little jetpack on. He's kind of zooming up next to this bigger being. So all that occurred in the first 8 minutes that we were out in the yard.
Gosh.
So I cannot explain that.
So the voices of the ETs, I mean, what did they sound like? Were they male or female voices?
They were male voices. They were speaking English. They, you know, sounded very professional.
Yeah, yeah.
One was called Captain. They actually referred to one as being the captain, and he says, I'm in charge. just incredible audio.
And so are you going to publish the audio and the video?
Um, our plan is to eventually, I mean, we've been sitting on this stuff for 5 years because we really didn't know what to do with it. I mean,
I mean, it's
we wanted,
explosive.
yeah, we wanted Kathy, to work with us, and she's been so great, adding her expertise, and not only from her experiences and the ones, with her family members, but also her just her knowledge in general about um, footage and being able to help us, enhance the video.
Yeah. Are you maybe in the back of your mind, maybe a little bit concerned that, the men in suits will show up and confiscate it?
Um, Not really, although I have been in communication with a woman who is a psychic. She's worked with police departments and training police officers on cold case files and how to use their intuition in solving cases. She's written some books, and she says that she's actually had visions of me being encountered by men in black. Now I have no conscious memory of that,
Hmm.
but she's really encouraged us to protect our information, and it is copyrighted, and we don't share the actual files with
Yeah.
very many people. We're just not sure what to do with it at this point.
Yeah.
It's just such incredible evidence, and I've been, interested in this kind of stuff my entire life. Travis Walton. I remember, when that movie first came out in his book, and we just don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. And the fact that, I mean, you think the ETs, I mean, the technology and their own knowledge and ability to pick up on things would be so far superior that they would have known that something was still running, recording them. But I always get the feeling that a lot of the time is that they're so bold and brazen that they want us to talk about what we've seen, and I just get that feeling.
yeah, I do too. I think it's like breadcrumbs, that they want to drop
Hmm.
around for people who are willing to explore and investigate, and I also think, as we were talking earlier, that it has a lot to do with each individual's vibration and the amount of energy that they emit. That and Ashley and I struggled with this early on in our investigative careers, just researching the paranormal, because we would, watch TV shows or encounter other paranormal groups who were over the moon if they captured 5 EVPs. And we were coming out of location with hundreds. And so we were like, why do we get so many EVPs and other people only get a handful? And when we started studying quantum physics and understanding, that we're all energy beings and we vibrate, and what we theorized at a very elementary level is maybe we just vibrate brighter, and
Hmm.
they can tune in
Yeah.
on us somehow, that they're getting that signal, that they can communicate with us.
Yeah. Now the $64,000 question obviously is: um, were you regressed to find out what actually happened in those 105 minutes?
Yes, that I started having some flashes of maybe what had happened on board the craft after, probably in 2016. I would wake up with a lot of anxiety, and I've always been like a really laid back person, just wake up really happy and
Hmm.
ready to meet the day. And I just started waking up and just feeling very anxious, and and then I would have sort of glimpses of maybe things that had happened on board, and I wasn't sleeping well. So I sought out the services of a psychotherapist, through my job. That was a benefit. without any cost. So you could talk to counselors if you had any kind of troubles or whatever. So I sought out this woman who was very open-minded. Um, we did some mindfulness and meditation, and some things started coming through with her. And at that point, I reconnected with Kathy, and she conducted about an hour and a half phone interview and felt that I would be a good candidate for, a formal regression. And so I visited her home in 2019 in the spring, and had like an 8-hour interview in person, and probably a 4 to 5 hour regression that took me, back through my childhood and to a past life, and then to that event that night. And a lot of information came through about what actually happened on board the craft.
Okay. Are you in a position to talk about that yet, or not?
Sure, I can share some of that. So what I recall was stepping into like a small, foyer, is the best way to describe it, onto the craft, and there were 4 beings there. And if I had to guess, they were about 6 feet tall. There were 2 males, 2 females. I remember the males being dressed in just this beautiful royal blue, like bodysuits. And they each had what appeared to be like a chevron emblem in yellow or gold, but I'm thinking it was yellow on the left side of their chest. And the one that I think was probably the leader, he had a couple of lines under the chevron.
Right.
And he was maybe 40, something like that, and the other one was maybe 30.
So they looked human?
They looked very human. They were, again, very beautiful, good-looking people. Their hair was not as dark as the 2 beings that I encountered as a 10-year-old. They had more, it was lighter brown hair, pulled back. The male's hair was pulled back, and so was the female's. Their features were very chiseled, really chiseled, straight nose, thin lips, pale skin. They were whiter than me, but very, very attractive people with dark eyes that were a little bit bigger than human eyes and very dark. The women were dressed in these beautiful, like almost like an abalone shell, these iridescent colors, their bodysuits. And they had gold necklaces on that went down into a chevron type point. But the males stood a little bit in front of the females, and they were all standing back to my left. But there was a beautiful blue, like a bluebird blue ambient lighting within the craft. And we walked forward out of that foyer into a wider opening to what initially I felt was like a water wall. I don't know if you've seen that kind of thing, like in a high-rise building.
Yeah.
So in some of my first memories, that's how I described it. But under regression, it came through clearly as more of a plasma wall that was just this beautiful blue kind of going down. And occasionally it would turn green, this beautiful green at the bottom. And what they communicated to me was that's when the ship would begin to energize, the green would come in. And once the energizing of the craft stopped, it would go back to blue. And none of this was spoken, it was all like mental download. There was like a matrix of numbers embedded in this plasma wall, but that was the energy for the craft. And so I turned and could look, and we stepped up. It was like into the domed part of the craft. And, I was asking, well, how do you know where you're going? I don't see any windows. And then suddenly these windows appeared. They were like smart windows. They only appeared if you thought about them. But
Gosh.
what they downloaded to me was that they did not need to see where they were going because they hop across timelines. They don't
Wow.
have to see where they're going.
Goodness me. So what was the purpose of taking you up on the ship?
Um, what they related to me was that they had always known me. And this is not the first time that I've encountered them, that they've, you know, taken me many, many times. And they come to this frequency or dimension or whatever periodically, as they're kind of probing this part of our galaxy. And at one point, they were here, but it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. They had left their planet because it can no longer sustain life. They came here and then they moved on further. And I think from some of the EVP evidence that Ashleigh and I have picked up, we received information that they're beyond the Kuiper belt, further out
Hmm.
beyond our solar system, past the Oort belt, that like there's some Oort, ORT belt of meteors and ice and so forth. And that's part of, the Kuiper belts out there, but whatever's beyond that. So I have done some research, and I think that's Alpha Centauri.
Hmm.
Um, so, and I don't know if that's Adela, what they call Adela.
Right, right.
Um, so maybe that's where they're from, but
Uh,
they didn't tell me that directly during that
yeah.
event.
And you were under no, I guess, threat or danger at, your whole time on that ship?
No, they're there. They were there just to say hello, and that they've known me throughout all my lifetimes. And periodically they come in, and maybe that's who came and got me when I was that 10-year-old.
I'm thinking you've kind of been blessed with some divine guidance.
Yeah, it feels that way. It really does. I feel very lucky in a sense that I've never like wanted this to go away. It's something that I just want to know more about, and it certainly has led me down the path to where I am today.
Yeah. Do you ever get the chance or at the moment think of, asking them, where did we actually come from?
Ah,
Because you
no,
mentioned they were here, hundreds of thousands of years ago, but who did we come from? Was it them?
I think maybe some of us did, not everyone. I think we're an interspecies, um, and whether it's all flesh and blood, I don't know. Maybe we were
Right.
just forms of consciousness before, or um, I don't have an answer for that. They've
Yeah.
never told me directly.
Yeah. That just sounds like an experience all of us just want to have. Your time on that ship, and I guess the language used by Ashleigh as you were being dropped off.
Yeah, we were very sad. It should be brought back.
Wow. Well, Pamela, it's been a fascinating chat. We've just gone a little over time, but I could sit here and speak to you for hours. So just before you go, what are you doing now? Are you doing anything in particular?
Well, I'm still trying to communicate to them. I do EVP sessions here in my home in the office, and I ask more questions about where did you take us, even further. They showed me things while I was on board, And Ashleigh and I have the sense that we were gone much longer than just the hour and 45 minutes, maybe perhaps days or weeks,
Gosh,
if they
yeah,
can spend time, and it appears they brought us back into the wrong timeline at the beginning of the evening. How long were we really gone? And they've told me that we were taken to a conference, and Ashleigh had some additional um, information come through during her regression about where we were taken and what occurred. But that's her story,
yep,
so
yep,
I won't go into that. But there's still a lot more to the story that I haven't gone into today, just for the lack of time. And but we just hope to keep learning more and more about it.
for
And
sure.
I'll never stop asking questions.
No, well, when I was taught from childhood, question everything, question everything,
Oh yeah.
and hence the profession I went into as a journo. Um, Pamela, just before you go, I mean, do you have a message for other contact experiences who have stayed quiet um, for fear of being ridiculed if their story goes public, but they still want to share their story, not with everyone, but with someone?
Well, I would encourage them to seek out folks of like-mindedness, and they could perhaps meet people like that once we're free to travel again, at conferences that um, sort of have a focus on the UFO and abductee phenomena. Um, and there's lots of sites out on the internet. But maybe to first find someone in their area that they could talk to, and not to be afraid, because people need to hear these stories. I think
Hmm.
it may help us all, to understand that there's something bigger and greater than we
Yeah,
are.
yeah. And the fascinating thing is I mean, once you listen, I mean, I've probably listened to a couple of hundred just this year, and the similarities between people's accounts is amazing.
Yeah, and so there's a reason for that. I mean, we're having real experiences, and just like the monkey men thing, I had no idea that anyone else had ever experienced that until just recently. And so by sharing your story and looking at other people's stories, you find validation
Yep, yep,
for your own experiences. So
yep.
I tell them, don't be afraid,
Okay, great.
open themselves up.
Well, Pamela, thanks very much for your time. It's been a great chat, and we've gone a little bit over, but I could go another hour at least. But I hope to be speaking with you again very soon.
Yeah, I would love to, Dean. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Pam. Stay in touch.
All right, I sure will.
Pamela Nance joining us today.
Thank you.